I'm reading this book for fun because I like to ignore my schoolwork and read things I enjoy. So I typed up some quotes by Slavoj Zizek that I'd like to talk a little bit about, but I think most of them speak for themselves. Those who preach the need for return from financial speculation to the real economy of producing goods to satisfy real people's needs miss the very point of capitalism. Self-propelling and self-augmenting financial circulation is its only dimension of the real, in contrast to the reality of production. This ambiguity was made clear in the recent meltdown when we were simultaneously bombarded by calls for return to the real economy and by reminders that financial circulation, a sound financial system, is the lifeblood of our economies. What strange lifeblood is this, which is not part of the real economy? Is the real economy in itself like a bloodless corpse? The populist slogan, "Save Main Street, not Wall Street," is totally misleading. A form of ideology at its purest. It overlooks the fact that what keeps Main Street going under capitalism is Wall Street. There's this mentality that you need to, give more money to here or buy from here, when really it is Wall Street that is going to control what happens in Main Street. If you give money to Main Street, it doesn't work in capitalism. So while we're giving out bailouts and while we're doing all of these things, and people think, we shouldn't be giving the rich their bonuses, which is true. Just trying to fix the problem in this method it just doesn't work, because the only way capitalism functions is through those big corporations and is through Wall Street. Another quote is, "An exemplary case of the way the economic collapse is already being used in the ideological political struggle concerns the conflict over what to do with General Motors. Should the state allow its bankruptcy or not? Since GM is one of those institutions which embodies the American dream, its bankruptcy was long considered unthinkable." So, he talks a bit about this New York Times article and sums it up in the next sentence. "In other words, bankruptcy should be able to break the backbone of one of the last strong unions in the United States, leaving thousands with lower wages and thousands of others with lower retirement incomes. Note again the contrast with the urgent need to save the big banks. In the case of GM, where the survival of tens of thousands of active and retired workers is at stake, there is, of course, no emergency, but on the contrary an opportunity to allow the free market to operate with brutal force. This is how the impossible becomes possible. What was hitherto considered unthinkable within the horizon of the established standards of decent working conditions now becomes acceptable. We'd bail out the banks, and that we wouldn't immediately feel that same need to bail out General Motors. It's very strange how in that one sense, like what he said, obviously way more eloquently, that we want to allow General Motors to, still play part of the free market, that this is just, something that happens, thousands of people lose their jobs, bankruptcy, whatever, this is just how the free market functions. And then when you have even more corruption within the banks, then this is somehow seen as something completely different. Maybe not to people like me, because to people like me this is very contradictory and strange. But to other people this is like, apparently the banks are this thing that holds everything together, and they're somehow above other corporate entities. And they function outside the laws of the free market. They're almost not just in control, but we need them to be in control. We need them to function. If they collapse, it's like some sort of strange apocalypse. And here is something that I wish more people would realize, quote from page 32. "What Miller ignores is how the very state regulations he so ferociously opposes are enacted on behalf of the protection of individuals' autonomy and freedom. He is thus fighting the consequences of the very ideology on which he relies. The paradox is that in today's digitalized society, where not only the state but also big companies are able to penetrate and control individual lives to an unheard of extent, state regulation is needed in order to maintain the very autonomy it is supposed to endanger. So it's kind of like, working to be free. You have to, um, just all of these things that seem sort of counter intuitive or paradoxical, but really they make sense. Like, I make money so that I can go, traveling. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't have this freedom to go traveling. Just like, I think we do need these state regulations, and we don't need the free market. We need much more regulation in order to have freedom from corruption or from living in such a morally disturbed place. And I think this is something that I wish all of those people who are fighting, for freedom and whatever would understand. So there's also a quote about thinking through the problem instead of reacting to the problem as everyone seems to do. And I don't know, I'm not really actually interested in answers, I'm just interested in theorizing. So whenever I meet like people who are actually getting like political science degrees or whatever, they just sort of make me really uneasy because they have almost a religious fanaticism and belief, or very concrete beliefs in their ideas. And I could never be like that, I think they're crazy. So here's the quote. Immanuel Kant countered the conservative motto, don't think, obey, with the injunction, don't obey, think, but rather, not with the injunction, don't obey, think, but rather obey, but think. When we are transfixed by events such as the bailout plan, we should bear in mind that since this is actually a form of blackmail, we must resist the populist temptation to act out our anger and thus wound ourselves. Instead of such impotent acting out, we should control our fury and transform it into an icy determination to think things through in a really radical way, and ask what kind of a society it is that renders such blackmail possible. So, whenever people have these reactive views to anything, whatever party does in power, it's always more the fault of in my opinion, of the complete social structure itself and less of that. I mean, we're now seeing that the Democratic Party in the States is really not that different from the Republican Party at all. And I think people have known about this for a long time. But what's so interesting is how they can sell themselves. They can sell an idea and have so many people believe and buy that idea. And in the way that they think that they're really not buying the idea, that they're believing in the truth. And it's not different for Republicans. I think for these elections, it was more voting with it's not like you have much choice, but it's more just voting with your emotions. I know I cried when Obama got elected, I was like watching him, and just so much, it was just overwhelming. And that's so dangerous.